Hello everybody, welcome to Beauty for Ashes Facebook Live. My name is Lauren Byler. I am the director of Beauty for Ashes Africa, and we are headquartered in Morocco, which is where I live. If everyone's doing well in your quarantine life, whatever's going on in your lives. So I am here to talk about counseling victims of trauma, and I'm going to just kind of shoot the breeze a little bit while we wait for it to see if some people join us. But first, what is trauma? I mean, there's a lot of definitions out there of what trauma is, and I'm not going to try to give our decisive definition of what trauma is, but it is anything that, I would say, anything that deeply unsettles you and keeps you from being able to heal and to live in the joy and dignity that we were created to live in. Things that rob you of your peace. Hello, Melody. And anything that keeps you from living a full, abundant life. Trauma can be something that happens immediate. It can be a massive thing that occurs in your life that instantly changes everything, that the memories of it continue to affect your everyday life. Or it can be something that builds up over time. And I think what we're living in currently would be a long-term trauma where everything's changing all of the time. And things that are normally your routine are suddenly gone, and you don't know when it will end. And over time, this trauma builds up and builds up and builds up. And if we don't find ways and techniques in which to care for one another, there can be some very long-term effects that happen. I can push buttons and wave at people. So I work with women and girls who have been not just the victims of sexual trauma, but usually just long-term social trauma, living outside of the protective norms of family, outside of safety, outside of care and knowing value and worth. But whatever trauma you're experiencing, your body doesn't know the difference. And I think one of the things that can be very, very hard for any of us when we're experiencing trauma that might seem like comparatively less significant trauma is that we can condemn ourselves and not allow ourselves to actually feel the emotions that we're feeling and say, oh, well, this isn't a big deal. You know, these are little tiny losses. These are like, compare it to other people. And on any level that you do that, that can be very, very devastating. There is nothing wrong with feeling feelings. In fact, God gives us feelings to let us know what's going on inside of us. And it's what we do with our feelings that either move us in a way towards health or move us away from health and wellness. And denying our feelings is one of the ways in which we can keep ourselves from moving towards health. And so whether you're talking about someone who's dealing with a sexual assault or someone who's simply dealing with, I don't know how to go out and get groceries in a way that keeps my family safe anymore, like, your body is internalizing that something is off and something is wrong. And if you say to those feelings, oh, you're not valid, there's no reason for me to be afraid, people have it so much worse, then you're kind of just shoving it down and you're not moving anywhere towards health or healing. So one of the most helpful ways that we can process this particular season is just by asking one another questions such as, how are you feeling? And giving that person space to express how they're feeling. So let's say, you know, it's just you and your husband, or, hi Mom. Giving up my mom. Let's say it's just you and your husband, and you're the only people that you're seeing all day. It's a very simple thing to really sit down and say, how are you feeling? And then, however they're feeling, you might have an opinion on their feelings, but it's not always the most helpful thing to share in that moment, and to really listen to someone. And doing a very basic technique that you can do with whoever if you're quarantined with your 5-year-old, you can do this. It's hard, it takes patience, but, you know, they might be scared, they might be sad. Just sit there and be like, oh, I hear that you're scared, I hear that you're sad. Can you tell me more about that? That sounds really hard. Not actually commenting on your thoughts of, why are you sad? I mean, that might be like, well, why are you sad? But that kind of is a bit of like, now you have to defend your sadness. It's much more helpful to people to know that they've been heard, to know that it's okay that they feel sad, and then ask questions that might invite them to be sad. Like, what are the things that you're most sad about? Or, what's the hardest part about the situation? Or what sorts of things make you happy? After you've talked more about these things, you can then turn the conversation from their sadness and from their feelings. And then one of the things that we do, so we talk about, that's reflective listening. Just you acknowledge that you have heard the person. You repeat back them what you've heard. You give them a chance to tell you whether or not that's what they've heard. And even if you feel like you really have heard them and they're like, no, that's not what I meant, you just sit there and be like, oh, well, tell me more about what you meant. Or is this what you meant? And trust the person that they don't feel heard yet. And then allow them to speak, allow them to share. And then you can reframe their story. And one of the ways is, if they are sad, help them to think about what sorts of things make them happy. Maybe they miss some things that used to make them happy. And then you can help walk them through, okay, I really used to enjoy spending time with my friends, and now I can't. Talk more about how does that feel that you don't get to spend time with your friends. And then you can redirect them to some of the things that they can do and help them to be thankful for the things that they can do, and sharing your own problems. So these are just ways that in your normal life you can walk through with people who have been traumatized. And if you have any more questions about things like that, there are a lot of resources. You can ask me. But I don't actually consider myself an expert on this subject. I feel like I'm kind of one of those thief people. It's like, I have a master's in counseling, but I'm not a licensed counselor. I have experience in doing counseling, but not as extensive as so many other people. So happy to point you in the direction of a lot of more helpful people, especially for some of the deeper hardships that we're dealing with right now. There's so many things coming to the surface as we're sitting through quarantine that this is an opportunity to explore more deeply ways in which you can be deeper healed in things you've struggled with your whole life. You now have some space. It's like a giant pause button for so many of us to sit down, spend time in solitude, spend time thinking about what is my life and what am I doing and what brings me joy and what brings me sorrow, and giving yourself space to ask those questions. And it doesn't need to be some deep, intense thing. Just giving yourself 15 minutes to journal a day. I mean, it can also be massively pressuring ourselves to make this really meaningful season in life, and just allowing the meaning to come through by spending time and reflecting, and not giving yourself pressure like you have to make this matter. You don't have to make it matter. It does matter, because this is life. This is the life God has given us, and that makes it matter. So if you have any more questions, one resource that is great, the Trauma Healing Institute. I'll put a link in the message after I'm done. The Trauma Healing Institute is a great way for average people to get training in counseling, and especially in trauma counseling. They do seminars throughout the... Yes. Melody, would you be willing to post that link for Brene Brown? I agree with you, Melody. So the Trauma Healing Institute, I'll post that link too. And they're now doing some online specifically for COVID-19 trauma, online training for this is a very unique season of life, and it's going to need some unique interventions, but it's ultimately the same interventions that we all need. We all need healing in our relationships, and that's one of the things. I'll now move more into talking about specifically Beauty for Ashes. And so one of the things that we talk about so often is the removing of vulnerabilities is what we do. So in Beauty for Ashes, we seek to end sexual exploitation by removing vulnerabilities and empowering strengths. We do the tangible ways of removing vulnerabilities by providing housing and food and education. So that's very tangible, hands-on ways in which we take women who might otherwise, have would otherwise have been homeless on the streets, vulnerable to people just to get their next meal, be put into prostitution, have a place to live, a safe environment, food to eat, and opportunities to pursue education in order to get dignified employment. But vulnerabilities is a much deeper issue. We have girls in our house who are still extremely vulnerable to traffickers, despite the fact that they have their physical needs being met and that they're not going to need money in order to survive. But at the same time, pretty much every single girl we work with does not have a father figure in her life. Most girls have experienced sexual trauma on all sorts of levels, actually every single girl. And because of that, that is a deeper vulnerability. That is a trauma that will continue to lie to them until that trauma is brought to a place of healing. And so in counseling, what we are most trying to do is, one, create a safe family environment where they can share their stories and know that they're loved and cared for. So we believe that healing comes in community and in safety. So before we try to get anyone to talk about the details of their trauma, before we try to get anyone to tell their story details and things, we don't necessarily believe that is necessary for healing. We accept and love the girls under our care. We seek to mother them and to sister them, and we work hard to provide an environment of family and structure. And so a lot of our counseling unfolds in everyday conversation, over meals, over time, sitting down over a cup of tea, where, a girl has formed a relationship that is safe, that is secure, there's trust there, and she can begin to give words to her story. And she can begin to receive truth in response to many of the lies that have been kept inside. Because one of the most harmful effects of traumatic situations, and especially when people have endured sexual victimization over long periods of time, is they're not speaking about this to anyone, and they're not hearing another version of their story. So they're going to continue to believe that the things done to them, the things that happen inside of them, are who they are. And when they are living in safe relationships, when they know that they're loved, and they begin to talk about their story, and they're heard, and they're accepted, and over time given reframed thoughts about their story, that maybe you're not a shameful, disgusting disgrace. Maybe you are a beautiful creation. Maybe you were created to do good and beautiful things with your life. And as these possibilities unfold, the trauma that remains after a traumatic event, or when you've been saved out of something, is the lies that remain from the memories. So something happened to me 10 years ago, and I begin to believe that in the core of my being, I am a dirty, filthy mess, and everything I touch becomes corrupted. And then I come out of that, and now I'm in a safe situation. I'm getting my education to do something with my life. I have my physical needs being met, but I still believe in the core of my being those lies that were put on me. It's going to take a deep work of love and time to bring all of that out, all of that wound, all that festering wounds, and allow that to be exposed to love and to hearing ears. And that is where healing comes from. And it is a very long process for anyone. It is not something that happens, I tell my story the first time, someone doesn't judge me, and I'm okay. And it also takes a lot of patience and a lot of understanding. The next thing I want to talk about when dealing with people who have gone through trauma, and this is one thing you'll learn about if you sit through any of the training videos or do any of the online trainings, is taking care of yourself and being a person who is safe. And so I've often said the number one thing that traumatized people need is a loving, healthy person outside of themselves to help them. Well, the number one thing they need is God. But in that, God with flesh on becomes people who are themselves healthy. And so anywhere, I think it was Ed Welsh who once said, you can only walk with people the places that you have gone. So when you have unresolved issues in your life, when you live in fear, when you live in any kind of unresolved trauma, and you begin to work with people who have been traumatized, You are going to be constantly being exposed to your own weaknesses and your own sorrows, and anywhere that you have that you're not allowing deeper joy to come through, any place that you're hiding in your own heart, is going to become a place where you actually become a dangerous person to the person that you're trying to help. You can develop unhealthy attachments to that person. You can develop all sorts of issues within yourself that you then, maybe I struggled in this way and I haven't quite dealt with it. And so I begin to put on the person I'm working with these issues that I myself have. And I'm kind of insisting that they have it because I'm trying to work it out within myself in that person. And that's a very unfair thing to do with someone who has been traumatized. So the number one thing that you do when you're working with people with trauma is to ensure that your own heart is constantly being brought before joy and before cleansing, to make sure that you're settling your own identity in who you know yourself to be and what truth is, to make yourself a healthy person, or to allow yourself to be made into a healthy enough person to help bring other people into health. So that is a lot of what we do with Beauty for Ashes. It's removing, the counseling piece is removing the vulnerability of unhealthy, broken relationships, to help a girl know that she is loved and valued, and so that she won't go seeking love in dangerous ways. All right. Does anybody have any questions as you're moving through? Feel free to just pop them up there and I'll look at them. So we've talked about removing vulnerabilities. The next piece, one of the biggest challenges that we have doing this cross-culturally, is working with trauma victims in another language and in a non-literate language. One of the issues that we have here, especially in Morocco, is that the dialect in which people speak is not actually a written language for the most part. You can write it, but people won't be familiar with it. So even people who have gone to school would have learned standard Arabic and French. They wouldn't necessarily be a language that they would be able to read training materials in, and there's not a lot of videos and other materials in Moroccan dialect. And so one of the things that we're constantly working at here at Beauty for Ashes is producing materials in the Moroccan Arabic, so mostly video materials, because the majority of the girls that we're working with are at best subliterate. They might be able to really sit down and read, but reading is, because it's it's like if you study French all through high school and you could sit down and read Camus, The Stranger, in French, it wouldn't necessarily be something that your heart would engage in. It would be an academic activity. So that is one of the things that we're most involved in. And in doing that, we are training our staff how to do trauma counseling, and that is the ongoing process of what we're working in, is training our staff to be the safe people in the everyday lives of the transition house and when we do direct work with women in prostitution. And most of that is never going to be sitting down in a counseling office with them having an hour where they're set apart to talk. It's being on the fly when we're actually sitting out, with the women who are in the act of prostituting themselves, or being prostituted, and you have 10 minutes to sit down with them. And one of the true things in the life of most women in prostitution is that most of the people that they're talking with are also people in the commercial sex industry. So their narrative is remaining consistently the narrative of prostitution, the narrative of this is who I am, the narrative of this is the way life is, and it doesn't matter. And just to have someone come and sit down with you and have a conversation about something that's not about prostitution, not about this is who you are, and not a prostitute, but still willing to talk to you about something totally unrelated, is very life-giving. It opens up a whole world of, I have a friend who loves me for me and accepts me, but doesn't accept what I'm doing. And that's always a hard balance to have, is For the most part, I think for probably the first year and a half, I think most of them thought that we didn't really understand what they were doing. And then kind of crossing over that threshold and just becoming part of the scene. But you don't want to become part of the scene. You want to be someone who's changing the scene. And that's our constant factor in when we're sitting down and talking and engaging with women in prostitution is how do I let you know that you are loved and I care about you, but I desperately want to see you doing other things. And I think, unless someone has questions, I'm just going to kind of close with talking about the secondary issues. When we're talking about the healing of people who have been engaged in the commercial sex industry, one thing that happens in most trauma situations like this is you split your personality. And so we will meet with women while they're engaged in prostitution, and their personality will be very different than that same person that we might meet up with the next day while we take kids to the park. And it's a legitimate split. Like, they will have two different names usually for themselves. And, that aspect of their life will be totally separate from maybe aspect where they're living with their family and at home, and they don't talk about what they do or how they make money. And depending on, there's all sorts of situations. And so trying to bridge that gap without bringing trauma, trying to sit, in the park with your kids and bringing up, we know what you do. Do you want to talk about that when you're not in it, in a safe place? And that takes a very long time. There is just such deep wounds. Most women who are in prostitution have been in prostitution since they were teenagers. Many of them, it's a generational issue. Most of the women that we work with have children who are with them. And usually their daughters will start in prostitution and their sons will start in various other illegal activities, if not prostitution themselves, at very young ages. And this is the life that they've known. And the rest of the world just stands in condemnation over them. So to bridge that gap, to be the people who say, I still see you as a person, and I still believe that you are made in the image of God, and that your Creator loves you and has a beautiful purpose for your life, and it's not this. That is really what we are seeking to do. And that is a long process, which is one of the reasons why I don't like to sit here and talk about counseling victims of trauma, because there's so few, whatever a success story is. I feel like there's beautiful moments of light. There's horrible moments of devastation in it as you walk with people doing this, but it's a process, and everyone's in the middle of a story. We have that on our web page, that we're all in the middle of an unfolding story, and where everyone has a role to play, and that's how we see it. We look at the lives of a lot of the women we're working with, and it's just ups and downs, and so when we see the bottoms, when we see the downs, we just say to one another, like, this is not the end of the story. Like, there's something unfolding, and this could take 10 years to unfold. And it's just the slow process of sitting with people and allowing their stories to unfold. Currently, one of the girls that we really were investing in and really saw a lot of potential is currently in prison. She's quarantined in prison. And we can't go visit her, and it's really, really hard. And all we can do is pray and hope that what she's experiencing in prison right now is something that will move her away from this lifestyle. And then hopefully in a month we'll be able to see her again and sit down and help her to process this trauma. But that's mostly what it is. It's being present with people, listening and loving them. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to continue to post any questions about counseling. We'll go ahead and try to get some of those links to those of you who might want to take some online trauma counseling training. This would be an excellent time to do that. There's webinars happening all the time. I was going to say all over the country, because normally these are things that happen in real life. In real life, when you can go out again in real life, you can go to real places, and they'll do weekend trainings and other things, and they are fantastic. One of the most fantastic things about doing them is doing them on yourself. We all have unresolved issues, so it's just helpful. Often, when I was in counseling school, I would often sit there and be like, "This is like free counseling," and then I kind of come to my senses and be like, "This is like the most expensive counseling ever." But it truly is. I mean, the first thing, again, is your own self-care, your own healing, and making sure that you're doing this in community. I work with wonderful, wonderful, amazing people who I don't actually think are signed on. I judge you, Sarah. I don't actually, if you're watching this later at all, and other people who you know who you are, and we care about each other. Someone laughed. And that is the most important thing, again, is the community that we were created to care one another in. Okay, good. The Brene Brown link, go ahead and click on that. She is wonderful. And thank you, Debbie. And also the trauma healing training, I will go ahead and post that. I am making Melody laugh. I do that. It's actually one of my defense mechanisms that I'm working on, is not laughing when I'm sad. But I'm not sad right now. Everything's great. I have a beautiful balcony, which I'm very thankful for. And yeah, so there we go. And thank you guys for tuning in. And we'll see you again for more BFA Facebook Lives. And if you have any, thank you. Melody, you are so encouraging. She is one of those people that you can debrief with. Thank you. So if you guys have any ideas, anything that you're interested in that you would like to see someone ramble on about for a half an hour, feel free to put that message that we would, do it, because we're here. And there you go. All right, God bless everybody. See you again.